The courtroom hums with impatience as a lanky teenager in a faded hoodie shuffles to the defense table, drawing smirks from the bench and snickers from the gallery. His sneakers squeak. His knuckles are inked with the faint blue of a borrowed... When? A case number echoes, and with it an assumption. Poor, reckless, predictable. The judge leans back, amused, certain of an easy lesson. The bailiff relaxes. The prosecutors barely look up. No one notices the precise way the teen studies the docket, the quiet count of deadlines on his fingertips, the card tucked in his backpack. Today's performance isn't naivete, it's strategy, because the teenager they're belittling is the sharpest attorney in the room. The courtroom sat inside an aging municipal building, its walls yellowed by decades of tobacco smoke and indifference. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, humming louder than the quiet dignity anyone expected from a place where justice was supposed to be delivered. Most who walked into that room felt small, especially if their skin or accent didn't fit the judge's comfort zone. The teenager, who everyone assumed was a defendant in over his head, had learned long ago what it meant to be underestimated. His family carried generations of stories about doors slammed in their faces, job applications tossed in the trash, and neighborhoods policed more harshly simply because of their complexion. From a young age, he understood that racism wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was subtle, like the way a clerk avoided eye contact or how a teacher pretended not to see his raised hand. By the time he was 15, he had buried himself in law books from the local library. What started as curiosity grew into obsession. He read landmark cases like others read novels, memorizing precedents, dissecting strategies, and even shadowing community attorneys who fought tirelessly for justice in courtrooms just like this one. He never admitted it openly, but he was preparing for something larger. An opportunity to prove not just his worth, but the resilience of people written off too soon. And now, standing before a judge notorious for mocking young defendants, of color that opportunity had arrived. Everyone thought they knew the script, a troubled teen fumbling through excuses, a quick conviction, and another statistic in the system. What no one expected was that this teenager wasn't here to beg for mercy. He was here to change the narrative. The tension in the room thickened as the case began. On the surface, it looked routine. A young man caught up in a minor altercation, facing charges exaggerated to paint him as dangerous. For the judge, it was almost a formality. His smirk lingered as he glanced over the file, as if he had already decided the outcome. For years, he had leaned on stereotypes to make quick judgments, reducing complex lives to simple labels. Today, he thought, would be no different. The teenager let the silence stretch before making his move. With deliberate calm, he pulled a stack of papers from his backpack and placed them neatly on the desk. It was a motion so unassuming that few noticed at first, but the pages were organized with the precision of someone who had studied more than just high school assignments. Each document was tabbed, highlighted, and marked with citations that pointed to precedents most law students wouldn't encounter until their second or third year. As the prosecutor began with a casual, almost condescending statement about the reckless behavior of youth, the teenager raised his hand, not timidly but firmly. He addressed the court with words measured and sharp, citing statutes and previous rulings that directly challenged the prosecutor's claims. His voice didn't waver, even as the gallery erupted in whispers. The judge's smirk faltered. For the first time, he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he tried to follow the argument unraveling before him. This wasn't a panicked teen clinging to excuses. This was strategy. Layered, calculated, and precise. Each point the teenager raised dismantled the case brick by brick, exposing the flimsy scaffolding of assumptions propped up by bias. Spectators shifted uneasily in their seats. Some, familiar with the sting of prejudice, recognized what was happening. The system's usual script was being rewritten right before their eyes. Others, less willing to let go of their prejudices, muttered, under their breath, dismissing the performance as luck. But the growing pile of irrefutable facts said otherwise. Every statement the prosecutor made was met with a counterargument supported by documented evidence. The teenager wasn't just defending himself, he was exposing a pattern of over-policing. In his neighborhood, a history of inflated charges meant to intimidate rather than seek justice. He outlined inconsistencies in the arrest report, highlighted rights that had been ignored during questioning, and referenced community data that revealed how cases like his disproportionately targeted people of color. The gallery sat in stunned silence as the minutes ticked by. Even the bailiff, who at first had chuckled at the sight of a teenager representing himself, now stood straighter, his amusement replaced by uneasy respect. The judge, shifting uncomfortably in his chair, cleared his throat more often as though trying to reassert control. Yet every attempt to cut the teenager off only made the defense stronger, exposing the imbalance of power even further. What was supposed to be a swift trial was transforming into a spectacle, one where the lines between defendant and defender blurred. The boy who had entered the courtroom, dismissed as nothing more than a stereotype, was revealing himself as something else entirely. A mind sharpened by injustice, wielding knowledge like a blade. And as the rising action unfolded, it became clear. This was no accident. This was the plan all along. The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted completely. What began as a casual proceeding had transformed into a battle of intellect and endurance. The teenager, once dismissed as an easy case, now commanded the room. His arguments were relentless, weaving legal precedent with lived experience, forcing the court to confront not only the specifics of his case, but the larger, uncomfortable truths it represented. The judge, known for mocking defendants of color, attempted to reassert his authority. He interrupted, his voice sharp, trying to frame the teenager's arguments as irrelevant. But each time, the young man respectfully but firmly redirected, citing another ruling, another constitutional right, another flaw in the prosecution's logic. His words rang with the weight of truth, echoing louder than the judge's gavel could. Whispers filled the gallery as the teenager produced a final piece of evidence, a documented timeline showing that his arrest had not only been mishandled but orchestrated in a way that violated due process. He highlighted how the supposed witness testimony was inconsistent and how surveillance footage contradicted the officer's reports. It was undeniable. The case wasn't just weak, it was collapsing in real time. The prosecutor, red-faced and fumbling, attempted to object, but the teenager anticipated each move. Like a chess player several steps ahead, he countered objections with calm precision. The balance of power in the room had flipped. The same courtroom that once mocked him now leaned in, captivated. And then came the moment that silenced everyone. The teenager revealed his true identity, not just a defendant, but a prodigy who had been studying law under the guidance of community mentors, preparing for the bar years before most would even enter law school. He wasn't here out of desperation. He was here to prove a point, that knowledge could dismantle prejudice, and that assumptions about race and youth could blind even the most seasoned judge. The judge's smirk was gone, replaced by the rare look of someone forced to confront their own bias in public. For the first time in years, the power in that courtroom didn't belong to the bench. It belonged to the boy who refused to be underestimated. The courtroom sat in stunned silence, the air thick with the weight of revelation. The teenager, who had entered the room branded as just another reckless youth, now stood as a symbol of resilience and brilliance. His arguments had dismantled the prosecution's case, but more than that, they had peeled back the layers of prejudice that had been hiding in plain sight. What began as a routine hearing had become a lesson no one present would forget. The judge, visibly shaken, shifted in his seat. His authority, once unquestioned, had been tested not by another attorney in a tailored suit, but by a young man society had written off. For perhaps the first time in his career, the judge's silence spoke louder than his gavel. He granted the dismissal, his voice stripped of its usual smugness. The boy had won, not just his freedom, but the respect of an entire courtroom. But the impact stretched further than that room. Word spread quickly through the community, becoming a story whispered in church pews, recounted in classrooms, and replayed across social media. For families who had long felt the sting of injustice, the story was a spark of hope. It was proof that knowledge could be a weapon, that courage could shatter stereotypes, and that sometimes the most underestimated voices carried the most power. Yet, the teenager didn't celebrate as others expected. He knew this was just one battle in a much larger war. His victory didn't erase the countless others who had been silenced, mocked, or unfairly punished. Instead, it fueled his resolve. He would keep studying, keep fighting, and keep challenging the system that had almost swallowed him whole. As he walked out of the courthouse, his head held high, the question lingered for everyone who had witnessed the transformation.